you are looking at least at the distinct possibility of what I'm calling earthquake wars, all right? I think there are extremely suspicious things about the Haiti earthquake that indicate or suggest the application of a technology. If we grant the existence of earthquake-causing technology, and again, it does exist. The CIA had its own generals. It had its own, quite literally, a private army. One of the most famous of these generals was a general by the name of Ed Lonsdale, which ought to ring a bell to you since you're talking about men who stare at goats, because he was one of the very early pioneers in some of that research. I think that prior to what Leonard Bernstein calls the Tower of Babel moment of history, that there was a different kind of consciousness. But we also have to remember something else about most of those texts from that region of the world. You're not dealing just with humanity. I strongly suspect that those uprisings in Libya were not spontaneous at all, that they were steered by the intelligence agencies of the West, and in particular, Sismi in Italy, of course, because Italy had a long relationship with Libya, where he would subject people to enormous amounts of psychedelic drug cocktails and sleep deprivation, and then keep them asleep for 20 or 30 days at a time. Right. There were BBC broadcasts saying that some of that technology was actually used on the Branch Davidians. So, yeah, in more recent times, there is a great deal of evidence that has been used. Now, there was some sort of interface between this technology and the possessor of the technology itself. In other words, there was an interface either with their DNA, with their mind activity. Something is implied there. The other occult symbolism is obviously you have an attack on the Pentagon. Well, the Pentagon is, of course, an inverted pentagram, the symbol of Venus, looking at the product of a cooperation between those two elites, but it's been the so-called bad guys that have been driving a lot of this stuff all along. And you had Madame Blavatsky quite literally attempting to square esoteric doctrine with the findings of science in her day, namely Darwinism, and that's how theosophy came to be, and saying all along that the most evidence for a biblical version of the flood, a planet-wide flood, isn't on Earth, it's on Mars. When Morgan loaned money to people to get their concerns up and running, what he took as collateral for his loans oftentimes was a share of stock in the company. So in other words, during the period from the fall of the Papal States in the 19th century to the diplomatic recognition of the Vatican by fascist Italy in the early 1920s, this is the man that's wheeling and dealing and amassing and reinvesting the Vatican's fortune to bring the papacy back economically. That a lot of that money is being shoved into some very sensitive black projects for even more advanced technologies that are not going to make the front page of the Wall Street Journal, needless to say. I really wish people would start remembering this. Number one, they ended World War II sitting on top of a massive pile of cash. This, what you see in Afghanistan, what you see in Iraq with these types of programs, the military has been investigating these types of programs for a very, very long time. Countries, and they're using electronic equipment. Who's supplying it? Very simple. Planning to regulate the internet right out of existence, or so regulate it that discussions like this wouldn't happen, then that would be the way to do it. You'd start leaking sensitive government secrets on it. But in point of fact, if you read the thing, if it's an embarrassment, it's a very peculiarly constructed one, because there are two things that Galbraith says. If peace were suddenly to break out, then what can the government use to get, in the period previous to the revolution, when the 13 colonies were issuing their own paper money debt-free into circulation? And incidentally, some of those colonies ran their own banks and floated low-interest loans to farmers and so on to get their businesses up. The way I look at what Putin is trying to do, and has been trying to do, is, and beginning with the assassination of the man with polonium, it's just a novel way of getting rid of somebody, that approached Russia and asked Russia to, offered to pay them a lot of money and asked Russia to modify their weather so that they would have a good growing season. And Russia said, sure. If we look at crop circles, there is abundant evidence that they are formed under extreme microwave energy. I have written about it insofar as my research on Nazi technology has touched on some areas of that particular field. Obviously writing a book called Roswell and the Reich tends to put you on. You have to allow the possibility that if some of this stuff flying around is the product of a human technology, then it stands to reason it's got to be coming from some sort of, hidden or underground or underwater base somewhere.